Hello and welcome to this side event of the Global Futures Forum. I'm delighted that you can join us online and also our esteemed panelists here in this very room. This side event is part of the Global Futures Forum and organized by GFOD, the Global Forum of Communities Discriminated on Work and Dissent. And we will explore in some more detail how some of the concrete proposals could be impacted, but also what intersectionality means in some more detail by looking at the communities that have this specific experience of discrimination based on work and dissent, which is maybe most known as an Asian phenomenon, but in fact, it's a global phenomenon that this network covers. We have esteemed speakers in this room with me, Durga Sob and Alyun from Mauritania. We also have speakers online, notably Risa from Japan, but also others from Asia, who we also hope to give the floor. So once more, welcome to all of you online and also in this room. We are currently in the 10th floor, at the 10th floor of the UN Church Center in New York, where the Global Futures Forum takes place. But this room is basically only for the speakers, and all others are kindly asked to join us online. We also welcome questions in the chat and other interventions throughout the event. Now, let me turn to our esteemed panelists to start. Durga Sob, to the right of me, is from Nepal. And let me just get her introduction to properly kick us off. She is not only the chair of the Asia Dalit Rights Forum, ADRF. She's also a Nepalese human rights activist, feminist, and identifies as a Dalit. She's founder of the feminist Dalit organization FEDO in Nepal. And also Durga is a lifelong advocate for the rights of Dalit women and serves as president of her organization. She has so much to tell, and she has been in this fight for decades. But the novelty maybe is to now bring this at the global level to link with other communities as part of GFOD. And Durga, to maybe introduce us a little bit to this concept of CDWD, and also to kick us off right into it, what are some of the demands that we can find and articulate?
Thank you so much. I'm a Durga. She already introduced myself. I'm from Nepal. And namaste, good afternoon, and Jai Bhim. Thank you so much for this side event and inviting me as a speaker. I like to give you some introduction of CDWD communities. Communities discriminated based on work and dissent, DWD, are some of the most excluded, segregated, and marginalized group at the globe and local level with their social, economic, political, and cultural systems. The inequality and disadvantages they experience exist in various services like education, hunger, elevation, health, water sanitation, employment, voting rights, equal access to land and housing, access to religious institutions in the public sphere, disaster risk reduction, and environment health, some of which are represented in the SDG through the definite goals. Gender equality, peace, and justice continue cross-cutting. Significant determinants which must be addressed mitigate inequality within the countries. The caste system in Asia is the most commonly known example of decent work and work-based discrimination globally. Dalit, formerly known as untouchable and impure, are the largest community discriminated work and dissent. In Africa, Latin America, Europe, the phenomenon of dissent and work-based discrimination is also common in force through complex cultural belief and behavior systems. The Haratins in Africa, the Roman people in Europe, the Burakumin in Japan, and Quilombolas in Brazil are still are a small section of various groups who experience oppression through the discrimination on work and dissent. In addition, sexual violence, gender-based discrimination, gender-based violence, and the enslavement of women and girls are girls and control of their reproductive right is a common enforcement mechanism of the imposed social order for all. We will hear from a number of speakers today. I would like to share some of the demand we have as collectively with you, which we would like to take action. First, one, to give legal recognition to the discrimination on the basis of work and dissent, and recognize of the right and entitlement, as well as protect mechanism to ensure their rights. Two, to evolve a common human rights framework with strategies to end the untouchability, traditional forms of slavery, modern forms of slavery, and discrimination based on work and dissent. Third, to give due recognition to the rights of growing population of the CDWD affected children and youth. Plan especially design a deployment project that are relevant to their needs today, and accordingly allocated a special budget and ensure their effective participation in the implementation and review process. Fourth, to statutorily mandate reservation in employment, procurement, and services in both private and public sector. Fifth, to establish legal mechanism with follow-up measure in all countries with a view to monitor the caste and gender-based atrocity committed against women and girls of CDWD communities. Six, to evolve a common legal policy framework with strategic project and ensure the rights of community discriminated work and dissent. Seven, to ensure the equal rights to political participation for the affected community, including the rights to participate in policy making and in public election, the rights to equal opportunity to run and to be elected to public office, and the rights to govern with independence and freedoms. 8, to ensure climate justice and accordingly safeguards the rights of CDWD who are the most vulnerable people in facing the disastrous effect of climate change, and therefore to protect them equitably and fairly from the inclusion during the humanitarian crisis, and ensure that special mechanisms are in place to address these forms of discrimination. 9, to establish effective and inclusive monitoring mechanism for the reviewing the implementation of the law and policies, budget and scheme where they are in place, with strict panelists for non-compliance, negligence, and dereliction of the duty, Thank you so much for listening us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Durga, for this powerful list of demands that we can clearly articulate already at this point. But also let's maybe take a step back and look at which are the communities that are discriminated based on work and descent in the different continents. And also here a little bit to understand, because some people might not be familiar with the concept of communities discriminated in work and descent. So we will next hear from Alouin from Mauritania, but also part of the African diaspora here. And I mean, I want to ask you concretely, Alouin, to talk a little bit about the experience of the community in your country, but also to talk about what might be some of the solutions that we see, some of the clear demands that Durga has already articulated. How can we make them a little bit more precise and really take out some of the demands into practice? What would that mean if you were president of Mauritania tomorrow? What might be one of the solutions that you could implement then? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Johannes. And I'm really happy to be here today talking about this very important subject, which is a Haratin community and the slavery in general in Mauritania. I would say the practice of slavery has historically embedded into Mauritanian society. And believe it or not, to this day, some Mauritanians are still born into slavery. In fact, my country was the last in the world to abolish it in 1981. Even when someone is emancipated, he remained labeled as an ex-slave. So he still isn't considered as a full free man. Although many believe that the practice of slavery has disappeared around the world, in Mauritania, some people are still born as a property. They are a slave by descent and a slave at birth, despite the fact that Haratin make up the majority of the population in Mauritania. They are yet subjected to the captivity discrimination. So slavery, discrimination, and marginalization are socially institutionalized and religiously and culturally legitimized and blessed by religious leaders, intellectuals, politicians, and the military system. So these slaveholders are against any who oppose such in full bondage, discrimination, and injustice. And some statistics, they said, like around 20% of Haratin do not have official documents of or have access to formal education. They work without rest or regard for their health, because many enslaved men run away from masters in adulthood, and about 80% of these victims of slavery are women and children. So Mauritanian government has brutally repressed and persecuted and imprisoned a large number of Haratin human rights activists in attempt to stop anti-slavery movement. And presently, Haratin, they have a powerful movements fighting for equality, justice, and a Mauritanian without caste and without ostracism. For the past 15 years, the Haratin, along with other local and international human rights activists, have struggled to obtain basic universal services and marginalized group. Thus far, we have succeeded in forcing the military system and oligarchy system to enact law that's incriminized slavery, create Tadamun, now is the Azur, as institutions for the integration of ex-slave and a victim of slavery. Also, we were able to establish a court specialized in the trial of slavery crimes, although all of these mechanisms that have been established are badly implemented. That means the law are not applied. So we have a mechanism, legislative mechanism. We have some financial institutions also that were supposed to address the issue, but are badly implemented. Last but not least, I really appreciate the GFOD Global Forum for creating the CDWD, Community Discriminated Based on Work and Descent, as a space that allowed many of the muted voices across the world to be heard. This space shed light on the phenomenon of CDW communities and the discrimination that are facing. Last, I would like just to highlight the recommendations. In my point of view, I think if we focus in education in terms of giving scholarship to the youth Haratin, as many of some of Haratin NGOs like Sahel Foundation under the leader of Ibrahim, he focusing in education. If we focus in education, in 10 to 20 years, Haratin will be out of that, and we will be able also to close that gaps. So thank you very much, and I'm open for the questions.
Thank you very much, Alwin. Thank you for your detailed and also clear recommendations about the solutions. Next, I want to see if we can go online to Risa. Risa Kumamoto, I saw that you are online. Feel free to unmute yourself and also activate your camera. And I hope the moderator can also spotlight you, that we can all see you. And while you do that, just to a little bit contextualize this, we now heard from Asia and also from Africa, the different kinds of social hierarchical stratification that is enforced often through means of violence, but it's also a cultural norm that is adhered to. And education was meant to, was mentioned by Alwin as one of the solutions. And I want to kind of give this question to Risa. First of all, to explain a little bit the very interesting community of Buraku in Japan. There we can see you. And because it's a very, when I first asked her to intervene, she said in Japan we have, I think 30 course, 30 lessons of 2 hours each to understand the issue of Buraku in Japan. And sorry, we don't have that time, but yeah, maybe just give us a small insight into what it means in Japan to come from this community, and also to explain a little bit the concept that we see. To maybe introduce you also briefly, Risa Kumamoto is from Japan. She was a researcher at the Kindai University and a human rights researcher since 2002. She has earned her PhD from the University of Osaka, and her research has focused on the Buraku and also the liberation of women in general, but also the liberation of women of the Burakumin community. I won't say too much about her. There's so much more to say in terms of research and academic achievements, but Risa, the floor is yours.
はい、おはようございます。こんにちは、こんばんは。My name is Risa Kumamoto from Japan. I myself from Buraku community. Buraku, B-U-R-A-K-U. Oh, firstly, thank you very much for having me. And Buraku, B-U-R-A-K-U. Buraku discrimination dates back more than 1,000 years. People began to fear and discriminate against those whose work involved disasters, diseases, bodily injuries, death, and crime. The status of the discriminated people was later fixed during the feudal society. 100 years ago, this status system was abolished, and Burakumin may have equal rights and freedom. In addition, Burakumin established the largest Buraku liberation movement 100 years ago. However, why do discrimination and inequality still exist against Burakumin today, despite the institutional status system being banned and the Constitution guaranteeing equal rights and freedoms for all? First, there is no law in Japan prohibiting discrimination. In addition, there is no National Human Rights Commission to discuss discrimination. No surveys have been conducted on the actual conditions of minorities or discrimination by the government. No policy has been developed to eliminate discrimination, since the reality of discrimination and discriminated people are not recognized. In my opinion, this is because it acknowledges Buraku discrimination, and Burakumin admits the Japanese state itself, the emperor system, is based on discrimination. In order to make invisible the history and reality of a country founded on discrimination and exclusion against minorities with the emperor system as its symbolic ruler, they wish to make Buraku discrimination invisible. In modern Japan, social policies have been based on the philosophy of diligence, savings, and self-responsibility, a system in which social contradictions and risks are transferred to individuals and families. It is based on the ideology of family and eugenics, with the emperor at the top of the hierarchy. The ideology of social policy has resulted in social division and reverse discrimination. Buraku discrimination is embedded in the social structure, making it invisible to maximize profits of the state and capital through the ideology of family and eugenics and meritocracy. Japanese social policies do not explicitly discriminate against Burakumin. However, social policies based on the ideology of family and eugenics violate their human rights, equality, and dignity. The structure of Japanese society is established by discriminating against Burakumin. Burakumin are excluded from a discriminatory educational system based on academic ability and achievement. Because of the unfair logic of capitalism that seeks excessive profits, Burakumin are excluded from a labor market that regards Burakumin as having low productivity. A social security system based on family ideology and self-responsibility ignores Burakumin. A violation of the right to education leads to a violation of the right to work, and violation of the right to work leads to the violation of the right to social security. Consequently, human rights are interconnected, and human rights violations are intergenerational, resulting in the accumulation of poverty. Since the end of the affirmative action program in Japan for Burakumin, researchers and activists have conducted various surveys showing that the gap between Burakumin and non-Burakumin has widened again. Human rights violations against Burakumin are being driven by the downsizing of the public sector as a result of the spread of neoliberalism, as well as the dissemination of negative images of Burakumin through the internet. Those who do not wish to have Burakumin in their families or workplaces excluded from marriage and employment. In such cases, they use the family register system for background checks. The family register system revitalizes the family ideology established after abolishing the status system. The Buraku liberation movement, through its 100-year struggle, has pushed the movement to a where the elimination of discrimination and establishment of human rights as a social value and norm in Japanese society is becoming firmly established. This movement has also experienced a backlash because it challenges the theory of state and capital. Following World War II, the Buraku liberation movement campaigned for free textbooks for compulsory mandatory education, construction and expansion of public housing, a review of the minimum wage system, elimination of the discriminatory interview system in the workplace, correction of gender disparities in welfare payments, and establishment of high school and university scholarships. We have expanded mechanism for resolving the Buraku problem to establish the human rights of all people Furthermore, it is essential to note that since 1980s, we have struggled to establish a legal system protecting human rights and improving human rights standards of Japanese society in accordance with international human rights frameworks. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Risa, for this wonderful presentation. And maybe I can ask you just to follow up, because it was always a little bit difficult to then come back to you and then lose the connection, maybe. So you talked, I mean, about the concept, and I think very eloquently described some of the factors that introduced the issue of buraku in Japan. One of the, I think, points to highlight is there any physical feature distinction that we can see with the buraku community? And also, what process do you think, or what has industrialization done to the buraku? Because in many of the societies that we have heard before in Africa and also in Asia and other parts where countries are not as industrialized, there is also a strong element of work that is given intergenerationally to the next person, being a blacksmith, being a cleaner, being related to kind of the work on animal or human death or waste. How has this impacted in Japan, and what were maybe also these old professions that are not implemented anymore due to the process of development and industrialization in Japan? Thank you.
First question, in regard to first question, we cannot distinguish Black people from other non-Black people, linguistically, physically, or ethnically, racially, or the Black discriminations or Black prejudice have been constructed socially and historically. So there is no distinguishable physically. And with regard to second question, as you said, Black people have engaged with jobs which was considered as impure, pollution, but in the current situation, those jobs are not enforced to Black people anymore. But the labor market, we are being excluded as based on the past situation, past jobs, and current neoliberalism capitalism. So the past concept of pollution and impure, we connect or associate with the current neoliberalism capitalist system, have huge influence on the Burakumin, especially younger generation, because we have no affirmative action anymore. So not only the past situation or the past traditional jobs, but also we need to consider the current capitalist situation or neoliberal situation regarding the labor market. I think it's really important to consider the CDWD situation.
Thank you so much for this pointed and very interesting answer. I want to reflect a little bit more, but also to give the floor to Simona from the Roma community, who I think is with us. Simona, if you're there, please feel free to activate your camera and also mic. And while you do that, I want to reflect a little bit more on what Risa said, since there is no physical distinction, and the same is true for the communities in Nepal and in Africa. It's also largely the case. So it's not a physical distinction that makes communities, let's say, different. It is more a social stratification that has been really lacked to be recognized, and also to see that this does not fall within the indigenous community, which is again a separate entity. It also does not fall within the let's say Afro or racist or racism. It falls in a different category that has not been covered adequately, and that just as our name suggests, falls into this gap of discrimination based on work and descent. Simona, if you're there, please. There she is. Great to see you, Simona. Thank you for joining us at this late hour in Europe. And I know we also have some more speakers from Asia there, who will maybe also at a later stage can intervene, since we still have half an hour time. But Simona, you are from the Roma community in in Europe. Romania is a very busy country this year, as it has the UPR, the Universal Periodic Review, as well as the VNR, the Voluntary National Review, as part of the SDGs this year. But that aside, we know you're very busy with those two. Can you give us like a little bit of a reflection also about how the Roma community fits into this model, and just a little bit also who are the Roma, and are they just restricted to the European continent, or are they also going beyond that? Over to you, and thank you for joining.
Thank you very much for having me. Indeed, many of the aspects that Risa has pointed out, it seems like she speaks about the Roma in certain moments, are very similar. So Roma are an ancient European population coming from the northern India. There are some proofs, linguistic proofs that show that we have ancestry there. And this brought some sort of different perception in the European mindset to say so about who are the Roma, because the Roma were not seen as the white Europeans. In that context, Roma don't have a religion of their own, so they used to practice different crafts, like in the case of Burakumin, like blacksmiths, all sorts of traditional crafts. Yet once with the industrialization, they kind of lost this, and that's why now the level of formal employment of Roma is rather low. So Roma are quite diverse. In Europe, we are known as Roma, Gypsies, Sinti, travelers. We have different denominations, but we don't accept the term gypsy because it's pejorative, comes from the Greek atiganoi, which means untouchable. So we prefer the term Roma, which is also the word that we call ourselves. So as Risa has pointed out, maybe for her community, there are no specific policies or anti-racist, anti-discriminatory policies. But for Roma, in the last 20 years, we have seen that there are such type of policies, but there's no progress. And we activists, academics, we say that this lack of progress about the Roma inclusion into European societies is mainly due to the so-called anti-Roma racism. So everything that we as activists are trying to promote is not working, mainly because of the lack of political will coming from policymakers, but also the lack of Roma political and civic participation. And most of these times, these policies are lacking an ethnic dimension. So in other words, they are kind of doomed to fail. Roma have a rich cultural heritage. Nowadays, we have an Institute for Arts and Culture in Berlin, which is aiming to preserve Roma history and culture and language as well. But this is a non-governmental initiative, so there's no European or national initiative that kind of legitimizes, or acknowledges the contribution of Roma to European societies or to the Romanian society. And also, more importantly, I forgot to mention this, when the Roma arrived in Romania, they were enslaved. So they were enslaved for 500 years. And even nowadays, those who had an important role and contribution to this failed to acknowledge. And I'm mentioning here the role of the Church, of the Orthodox Church in developing this system of slavery and strengthening it somehow. So we are speaking about Roma as perceived as unclean, not smart. Roma children are placed into segregated schools. Roma women are forcibly sterilized. Roma are facing forced evictions, mainly because they lack IDs and documentation for their housing. And as Aliun has mentioned, I know it's kind of strange to make a similarity with the country from Africa, but we have legislation, but this is not applied. and the perpetrators are not punished as they should most of the time. So we also lack this implementation of legislation, of frameworks and strategies. So yeah, nowadays we have, as I said, this is our biggest hope at the European level. We have the so-called European Roma Framework for Inclusion, Equality and Participation, which is the European Commission plan for Roma inclusion up to 2030. And each member state of the European Union is proposing specific policies. We have high hopes that this time these strategies will work, and civil society is closely monitoring, especially this, especially the manifestation of anti-Roma racism. And we are trying to react even to the European Court of Human Rights and to address all sorts of injustices that Roma are facing. And besides this, just 1 minute, there's a lot of hope also among Roma youth, as Risa has mentioned in her case, that they will be the new generation. Roma are getting more educated. This is not a high number. We are speaking about between 1% and 4% of the whole Roma population having a higher education degree. But there is still a lot of hope in the younger generations that they will come with a new mindset and they will promote Roma rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simona, for this this pointed intervention, and also drawing on some of the similarities that we see between the different communities and their experiences, which makes it even more evident and urgent to recognize those different communities as experiencing as the same phenomenon of discrimination based on work and descent, since the work aspect is also very strong in there, but expressed in different manners depending on where the country is in terms of industrialization, but also of where the country's history and also colonial history comes into play quite interestingly. Before we go back to the speakers in the room, I want to turn to one of the speakers who is now, I think, past 1 o'clock in the morning for her, Prachi Salve from India. She's a budget expert and also works on some of the solutions that are implemented currently at the national level. So while you unmute and activate your camera, please let me reflect a little bit more and say that we've heard from Alwin also and from Durga that quotas and ensuring that the communities who are most discriminated against have a certain allowance of sports and education and housing in the different places, but also then in the budget concretely that we see. How is this implemented in India, and why is this currently not enough, or why isn't this working sufficiently? Prachi Salve, are you with us? Please feel free to unmute also and tell us a little bit about the context that you experienced. There you are. Great. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Johannes, for giving me this opportunity. So, budget plays very important role in community development, as we say, and it also reflects how the country is looking towards the community. So, it's very important to look in the budgets from the social point of view, right? And we have, like in India, even after independence, the SCs and ST communities, the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe communities remain away from the social development factor. Right? They remain far away from the development. So this scheduled caste component scheme and tribal component schemes, those specific schemes came into force in 1974 for tribal and in 79 for the scheduled caste. So the major purpose of the schemes was to these are the policies specifically for economic development of the communities. Okay. So but after that, like if we now it was first developed in 74, but now we are in 23. But if we compare the how after that various guidelines came on the basis how this social economic policies needs to be get implemented. The major factor is that money should be allocated as per the population of the community. But if we see, the implementation is very poor in India, because the money is not allocated as per the guidelines mentioned in the as per the guidelines. So, and the major there, if we further analyze those schemes, there are targeted scheme and non-targeted scheme. So, if we have streamlined targeted scheme, which are help for economic development of an individual, and there are schemes which, but there are very few schemes which are targeted, and there are more schemes which are non-targeted. So here we can see the major difference, like the money is allocated, but it is not targeted. So whatever the money is there, it is not getting utilized for the economic development of these communities. So this is the main fact we observe, and it is ongoing from many years. The same phenomena we can see while budgetary allocation. And so if we focus more on CDWD community, like Dalits are more or less, the occupation is different. Like Dalits are more into labor, Devdasi system is there, practices are there, manual scavenging practices there, and atrocities are more. Right? So for such major cause, the budget should be allocated. But if we see, the budgetary provisions are not made for those purposes. So the strengthening is not happening with this economic schemes as it is, but the implementation, if we say, it is very poorly implemented. So if this year if we take example, there is a new for manual scavengers. There is a new scheme developed by the government, Namaste, under which they promise to bring mechanization in the manual scavenging work. And for that, they have quashed the previous schemes for the manual scavengers. So it is not going to rehabilitate the manual scavengers. And if we consider the situations in India, there are still many manual scavengers working at the ground level for cleaning the drainage and the septic tanks and everything, like and running them. But what the mean I want to say, that schemes are not getting planned or as per the demands of the community or whatever the needs of the community. And even the Alvin said regarding the education focus, like we need schemes which will help on for education, because that is the only key for the community development. If we see CDWD community, the education is the key component for their development. But there are many scholarships are not scholarship schemes are there, but the allocation is very poor. Very few people are getting the scholarships for their higher education. And even if again, if we look at the higher studies and the status of the SC and ST, the institutional suicidal rates are increasing in India. So such cases are happening day by day. So the economic economic should be there, like economic supports needs to be there for strengthening this community. So and I will just conclude, like if for this, if we say what it is needed, we need a strong legislation in India. At various states, it is there, but in most of the states, the legislation is not there. So what happens? The money get diverted to the another thing. Like the government diverts money for the another program, but not for the benefit of the or strengthening the community. There needs a union budget, like at the national level budget is required, so that this money get utilized only for the purpose of development of the community. But this is the demand from various activists and the NGOs working in India, CSOs working in India, and they continuously advocating for this. But this needs to be happen as soon as possible for for strengthening the community. So if the community get strengthened, then only they can assert for their rights. That's why we need to look very carefully on the economic aspects of the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this pointed contribution from an Indian perspective, and looking also at some of the achievements that have been made, but again, the obstacles that are holding back the real implementation of the different policies that concern education and other areas. Now, I want to go back to the room and actually have some more ideas and interventions from the room. Before we give it to the general audience to comments and questions also. From the room, if you can maybe pointedly, I mean, give your reflections if you wish, but also I want to mention two things. First, that all communities that are discriminated based on work and descent make up about 270 million people, and it would be about the 6th largest country in the world. So it's not a small community; it's a large community scattered all around the world. Secondly, that the recognition or the lack of recognition has to do with this perceived low status those communities have taken historically and to this day, which makes them invisible and often servants at the lowest level to serve those in power. That is also why we can explain the lack of recognition to some degree, at least. Now, concretely, as part of the Global Futures Forum, we have also one track that talks about human rights and participation and the human rights, let's say, mechanisms. One proposal I think that we can already summarize is that we need to map the communities and recognize them by the government. But recognition alone is not enough. It doesn't solve the problem. Recognition might be the first step. The next step, which is also proposed as part of the project, so part of the recommendations as part of this forum in the work stream on human rights and participation, is, for example, to double the funding of the Office of the High Commission of the High Commissioner on Human Rights. Do you think this would substantially advance the problem, or what other concrete recommendations do you have, Durga, to kind of attack this problem on a more real level? If you would be the Prime Minister or the President of Nepal, what would be maybe your recommendation on your first day in office to eliminate this issue?
Yeah, you already mentioned about the recognition of the people who are mostly marginalized and vulnerable in the name of different discrimination and exclusion. If you go to my country, and we have a very fantastic and very progressive constitution in our country, and we have very good laws, and and act to address the issue of Dalit and other marginalized people. The problem is that it has not been properly implementation. It's a challenge, and the problem is that the implementation in practice. If it has not been implementation in practice, it is just the law in the paper. It's just law in the constitution, the one of the things. And another biggest challenge, what I have seen that I think everybody agreed on it. You have a good system in the country. You have a constitution. You have the law and act. But if you have a deep-rooted mindset, attitude or mindset things, and it cannot be the change. Who are in the power, those people who are in the power, if they have a mindset attitude, and it cannot be the implement, or it cannot be any change. So that's why how we can change the mindset attitude of those people who are in the power. That is the one things we have. So this is the one of the area we have to work on it. And another things we have been demanding, and we have shouting, we have raising our voice in international arena, especially in the UN level. But still our issues, our agenda has not been recognized. And this is the most important. If it is not officially recognized in UN level, and then the resources cannot allocate it for the Dalit and other marginalized people. So that is the one of the strong, demand or strong, action to allocate the budget resources for the marginalized people, and another is the recognition of their issue. That is the another things, because we are fighting for our identity, our dignity. So UN should listen our voice and our issues. That I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Alwin, over to you.
I would not have much to say, but I am really, I think bridging between civil society and a government and creating a space of real debate without any sensations that can bring us to the concrete solution. Also, the advocacy that the regional and local and international NGOs are, doing, that also will help to solve, I don't say 100%, but I can say 80 to 70%. So with the time, there is always a light at the end of a tunnel, and we hope that one day we will achieve it. In terms of money, nothing can be done without really allocating money and fundraising and be more specific about those stuff. If we talk about education, what type of education, what we are talking about? We are talking about the high education, but for who? Youth or girls? I think girls and women should be the crucial and the motor of our target. If we target the girls and women, we will arrive. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alwin. I want also now to look at the floor. If there are questions, please raise your hand and ready your intervention. While you do that, just to one specific point is gender-based violence has been shown to be used as a controlling mechanism to keep the perceived lower caste people also in their place. And that is a very severe form of discrimination that particularly affects women and girls. Anyone from the floor who wishes to intervene, please feel free to unmute. I saw some people before who wants to speak. Now is the time. While you unmute, please just jump in and interrupt me. While you unmute and put on your camera, I also want to mention that one of the other, because right now we are working towards the Summit of the Future, which will happen next year at the UN, which is a kind of a midpoint towards reviewing the SDGs. But more than just reviewing the SDGs, there's also an opportunity for us to make new, bold and interesting proposals. So for example, one of them that also has been raised here at the Global Futures Forum is to establish a new mechanism of engagements for civil society by appointing maybe a liaison for civil society, but also that civil society in each country could maybe elect directly representatives that are sent here to New York, who are also part of the decision-making process, to not only and solely have to go through the government who can make the decisions here. Just to open our minds towards also these initiatives, which could bring more quickly meaningful change in the long way and goes beyond, let's say, the current affairs that we have. Do I see any interventions from the floor?
Johannes?
Go ahead.
Johannes. It's Rahim from Mauritania. It's a good pleasure for me to be here with you guys and with Durga. I'm so proud of you, Durga, and Aliyun. Your intervention was great. You give a lot, and the others from Nepal and from Japan. And I would just say that this work that you are doing is very important, because now we have to do our best to be everywhere where there is meetings in the UN, in New York, in Geneva, everywhere. We have to be there, and we have to tell people about the community DWD in Africa, in Brazil, in Japan, the Dalit people, the Roma people. We are the same. We have the same struggle, and we have to join our hands and work everywhere. Like Aliyun said, education is the most important means for our struggle. Fighting against slavery, for example, in Mauritania, the problem of slavery is ignorance. Is because people is not educated. If we help people, and the focus, like Aliyun said, the focus should be on girls and women, because the problem is there. Now, I think we have doing a good job, but we have to move on and be everywhere where there is meetings. I'm pleased to listen to you, to Aliyun, to Durga, to the others, Rita and Torokol. Thank you so much. Lisa, excuse me.
Thank you so much, Brahim, for your intervention. We have 3 minutes left. I want to give it to the floor again. Any other interventions from the floor? Please feel free to jump in now. In the
Hello, good morning.
Please go ahead.
Yes, this is Halimatu from the Gambia.
Please go ahead, Halimatu.
Ma'am, Durga, it's Durga, right? I would want to know, I was wondering if you have Dalits in government, in power, in India, or in any parts of the world where you have Dalits. Do you have them in power, in positions whereby they can support the advocacy? Thank you.
Thank you. I think we can have this quick response, but if there's another question, let's maybe do that now. Another question you want to put from the floor, because we need to wrap up in 2 minutes time. So please, any other questions? Otherwise, this will be the concluding and last answer that we can have as part of this event.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that is one of the biggest challenges we have been facing. The power sharing is the most important. But in Nepal, we have a federal democratic republic country, but representation of the Dalit in the parliament and government is like almost almost nil. And so we are so it's a very big challenge and problem we have been facing, because why government not the power sharing is the most important. But recently we had a election, only one Dalit candidate elected in the election out of 275 seats. So that is you can imagine the representation of the Dalit in the power or government or parliament is very, very, very low. So that is also one of the issues we have been fighting in our country.
Thank you so much, Durga, for your really interesting answer and responses. We concluded here now, since we have this space will be used for the next side event that is happening now. Thank you to all the speakers in the room as well as online. This discussion has been very fruitful, and yeah, I think shows some of the gaps that the SDG, but also the human rights framework in general has, and gives us some more ideas to work on reform, to recognize CDWD, but also to work for general UN reform. And over to the organizers, thank you very much, and have a very good night, and very good evening, and very good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I would like to thank Johannes, the Global Forum of Communities Discriminated on Work and Dissent, as well as all the speakers for this powerful session.